What do you make of this? I mean, 4 incidents almost back to back, one shock after another. Is Germany strong enough to endure these serious attacks and all the implications behind this?
Yeah, as we heard in the teaser already, what we've seen is a series of amok attacks. A lot of youngsters ran amok and attacked various innocent civilians in Germany, of course creating tension in German society, leading to German society questioning whether the authorities can ensure inner security. However, so far it seems to me that the German public and German authorities reacted very calmly, very collected to these very traumatic events, for the mere fact that Germans were expecting this to happen. This is, you might say, the price to be paid for a liberal, open society. And by and large, as I just stressed, Germans are pretty much convinced that the German authorities are taking the right steps to ensure civic freedoms, civic liberties. However, whether this spirit, this rather collected, sober mood will endure, will depend on how German authorities deal with the issues in the weeks and months to come.
It is not just the measures that taken by the authorities, but more attacks are to come. Of course, pardon me to say so, but these are possibilities. But many question, Mr. Yang, because it was France, it was Belgium, but people were saying Germany probably is safer and could be safer than the others, given Germany's history and also Germany's refugee policies, very warm, welcoming all the refugees. So, were you surprised when the series of attacks happened during the weekend?
I think I'm so, sorry about that. 4 attacks, maybe 3 belong to the terrorist attack and 1 is some different. But for me, I was astonished by the 4 attacks. I still said that because of the history. Germany, I don't think it has some very hated culture with Muslim societies, because it has a long history with the Muslim migrants from the beginning of the modern, they use the word modern Germany. But why it happened just in 1 week? I think that it's not only because of the German reason, but also I think it's because of the EU is facing a very serious challenge, not only from the terrorist attack, but I think from the social change.
It is a social change, a lot of them going on in your part of the world, Mr. Lochocki. Therefore, the question is how likely the authorities are going to continue with their previously strongly held policies regarding immigrants, regarding Syrian refugees, and how will these incidents likely to change that attitude?
I do think it's utmost important to distinguish the issue of domestic security from the challenges of migration. What we know so far is that immigration policies will largely remain untouched from that very issue. These people have already been in the country for years to some extent. The perpetrator in Munich was even born in Munich, so this is by no means an issue of immigration. It's an issue of integration, of social cohesion, of how do you make sure a multicultural, open, liberal society can integrate as many people as possible. So I do think that German politicians are very aware of this is not an issue of immigration, but how do you integrate people over here. And it seems to me so far that German society has been, by and large, been quite successful in ensuring a peaceful living together. However, certain challenges remain untouched, and now the question is, what do we make out of this? That apparently there is these lone wolves, young men, which do not feel appreciated, recognized by German society. How do we make sure that they feel at home in a multicultural, pro-European Germany?
Mr. Lochocki, I have to follow up on this. You said it is more about the issue of integration. Yes, indeed, it is. But at the same time, one might want to also take notice of several of these cases. At least 2 of them are coming from very short time Syrian refugees coming into Germany. We are not trying to blame any specific social group for all the things happened, but there are some common characteristics which many social groups inside your country are also calling on the attention of the authorities. What do you think? Is it likely to change the overall atmosphere inside your country and therefore push the authorities toward certain policies and directions?
Good question. However, these numbers ought to be put into perspective. As you know, amongst the over the last 6 months, Germany took in 1.5 million refugees, amongst them hundreds of thousands from Syria. And now what we have is that 3 people committed horrible crimes. 3 people out of 1.5 million refugees. So one ought to bear in mind that this is not a social group which ought to be stereotyped, which ought to be criticized in general. However, you're right. The challenge is now to disentangle these individual cases from the broader issue, respectively, to make sure, are there certain groups which are more inclined to commit these atrocities, and if so, how do we make sure they don't? I think so. What we've seen so far from the reports is that this is more a challenge of individuals which did not feel at home, which did not feel integrated, and it doesn't matter so much where they are from, or that they're refugees, migrants, or that they're born here, but rather that they didn't feel at home, that they didn't consider themselves being a place, a vital part of German society, and this is a prime challenge. However, it seems that German politicians do not jump the gun and blame migrants in general for these commitments, for these atrocities, and they're after to strike a very nuanced bargain of what needs to be done, what are the lessons to be drawn from these tragic crimes.
I see. And now we are also joined by Max Abrahms, who is an assistant professor of political science at Northeastern University in Boston. Professor, welcome to our program. Thank you for your patience. May I ask you about this? Earlier, our German panelist, Mr. Lochocki, was talking about this is an issue of integration rather than issue that is coming from any specific refugee social groups or coming from immigrants. He also talked about the individual problems rather than these groups of immigrants having problems as a whole. What do you make of this?
Well, I mean, I think that the sample size is growing, and so we're able to be a little bit more scientific about it, but we still need more data in order to conclusively determine whether any countries are disproportionately contributing to the uptick in violence in Germany. Over the past week, we've seen 2 attackers from Afghanistan. One of them was an accomplice for one of the attacks. And we've also seen 2 Syrian asylum seekers. And so those are the kinds of numbers we're looking at over the past week. But if you go back further to the New Year's Eve attack in Cologne, Germany, that wasn't terrorism per se, but that was sexual violence on a mass scale with hundreds of victims. And I do believe that, at least it's widely reported, that the perpetrators did hail disproportionately from the refugee community. So regardless of what the scientific basis is, I think that there is a growing sense in Germany and around the world that Merkel's decision to essentially have an open door policy and to take in, hundreds of thousands of migrants, in many cases without serious vetting, has come to really backfire on Germany.
We're going to have Mr. Lochocki, of course, to respond to that from a German perspective. But for now, Mr. Yang, what do you make of it?
I don't think that I agree with the German colleagues. I don't think it's so serious for the German society. But for me, I think the number also shows some new phenomena. The new phenomenon means that the new migrants to European countries, including Germany, may be some different from the historical waves of migrants. And the third waves of migrants in the history to European countries from Muslim society, maybe they contribute a lot for the labors. But now the new migrants, most from the refugees, that's a challenge for the society of European countries. So that's why there are some young leader, a young man from Syria or from Afghanistan. They feel some angry with the attitude of German or French or other European countries to them. So that's, I think, is a new phenomenon, some different from the
Mr. Lochocki, very interesting phenomenon. It's a mixed feeling. On the one hand, they want to be in your country because it's a much safer place than the hometown. However, once inside your country, they feel disconnected, disintegrated, disrespected. So these 2 emotions, in a way, mixed together, something could happen. So, Mr. Lochocki, in the short term, can anything be done to deal with this? Because emotions, it's very hard to change. Social attitudes, very hard to change.
Yeah, once more, I beg to call for some refraining from generalization. We need to put this into perspective. The vast numbers of migrants which have come to Germany have been integrated rather successfully, which is especially amazing given the mere size and the brief amount of time it took for them to come here. Within 6 months, it was 1.5 million people. However, it ought to be borne in mind that Germany is not heaven on earth. It's a society which has to deal with these problems in a long-term perspective. Germany cannot work miracles. It might take time, months and years in order to integrate 1.5 million people into the labor force and into German society as a whole. And there you're totally right. There are some challenges, you might call it collateral damage, which is going to arise. However, this is not really a backfiring of Angela Merkel's policy, quite the contrary. From autumn last year onwards already, nearly all German politicians were aware of the challenges coming along with this open door policy, and everybody was expecting these challenges, these problems to occur. Everybody was aware of this, everybody was expecting this. The question is though, what do we make out of this? And I think it's very important to remain cool-headed, and German authorities are on the way to do so.
Well, it seems that Mr. Lochocki are much more cool-headed than you, Professor Abrahms.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to what these attackers actually say, rather than just speculating, they don't say that they're attacking because they're not well integrated into the country. You know, we know over the past couple hours, we've seen more videos from, you know, the latest attacker. And he said that he declared his allegiance to Islamic State and attacked Germany, not because he was poorly integrated, but because Germany opposes Islamic State. And so Islamic State is calling on people to attack countries that oppose Islamic State. It doesn't have to do with whether or not they're integrated. Furthermore, I disagree with the other guest that, you know, Germans were fully expecting that there would be 4 attacks in a week, 3 of them from, you know, arguably refugees, including asylum seekers. That's a lot. I don't think most Germans understood that if they embraced all these refugees, that they would have 3-4 attacks a week. That's a very high number. That is statistically significant. That is an abnormal situation in Germany. So let's not pretend that this is just business as normal and that everybody in Germany is perfectly happy with this level of violence. I don't believe that to be true.
Right. The thing is what to do, of course, at this moment, all of us would at least agree upon that. But Mr. Yang here in Beijing, what can be done? Because at this moment, we don't even know, people do not even agree with one another on the terminology and the meaning of terrorism, not to mention to work together upon the fight against the terrorism. And there are lone wolves, there are those coming from outside, there are those Pledge of Allegiance coming from young people who have been in the country for a long time, all of these possibilities. So is there a way to work together? The only thing about terrorism is that it is unexpected. You never know when it's going to happen and in what form.
I think the first thing is I hope that the European politicians don't want to change the policy, especially for the refugees. I hope that they can continue, as a German colleague said, to open policy to the refugees. Secondly, I think that they have to keep some very strict policy for some black market for the gas or for some medication, something like that.
Well, before we go, we also have the other 2 guests, maybe 1 or 2 sentences from each of you to wrap it up. What can be done given the very confusing situation? Professor Abrahms.
Sure. Well, in terms of Islamic State, I really think that there are 2 different threats which are only weakly interrelated.
Right.
The first is Islamic State as an organization based in Iraq and Syria. We're doing well with them. In terms of the lone wolf attacks that are more international, we still don't have an answer.
I see. Mr. Lochocki?
Well, I do think we shouldn't overemphasize the impact of the Islamic State. There were 2 or 3 lone wolf attacks, and these people claimed they would be affiliated with the Islamic State in order to increase public attention of their atrocities. So of course this is a low-hanging fruit for the Islamic State. This is not so much about these guys, it's about making young migrants feeling appreciated in Germany, and German authorities doing a good job in telling German citizens, we will take care ensuring domestic security.